The Lake Forest Podcast is supported by viewers, listeners, and businesses just like you. Looking for the best pool supplies? Look no further than Dohany's Pool Supplies. With a history dating back to 1967, this family-owned business offers everything families need to keep their pools clean and sparkling, from chemicals to equipment. Plus, customers enjoy free shipping on all orders. Visit Dohany's Pool Supplies today at doheny.com, DOHENY.com, to learn more. Broker Michelle Parno has lived and worked in Lake Forest for over 2 decades. Michelle's lending experience, when combined with her real estate expertise, makes her an invaluable asset to her clients as they navigate their home buying or selling process. Call Michelle now at 847-528-8721, 847-528-8721. For the best cannabis in the world, look no further than Iliad Epic Grow. Owned by Lake Bluff's own Rich Ruzich, they are a cannabis cultivation center focusing on hard-to-find small batch products that will delight both the occasional user and ganjier. When visiting Michigan, ask for it by name. Epic Products, exceptional process. For more information, email info@iliadgrow.com. Havey Communications has been helping first responders arrive safely since 1983. It's owned by Lake Forest's own Mike Havey. Check them out at haveycommunications.com. Laracy & Company CPAs, founded in 2010 by Lake Forest's own Brian Laracy, specializes in tax preparation and bookkeeping services. Earning the People Love Us on Yelp award, their process is straightforward. Just upload, review, and file. For a free quote, visit LaracyCPA.com now. That's LARISEYCPA.com. Explore top-tier aesthetic care at Aesthetic Beauty Lounge, where they specialize in the latest Botox and fillers. Experience the pinnacle of elegance and professionalism in every treatment. Ready for your transformation? Visit Aesthetic Beauty Lounge at 775 Bank Lane in Lake Forest. That's near Wisconsin Avenue. Begin your journey to beauty today. We'd also like to say we're thankful for our Patreon supporters, Otto, John C., Helen, and Herrick.
Hey, good morning, Pete. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hey, Jake.
How are you?
Absolutely fantastic. You in Illinois or Florida? I'm guessing Florida.
I am in Florida. Hold on one second. I don't know why it's not on to use my camera. There I am.
And here's Joe. What's the weather there?
Philly this morning. It was only about 50 degrees when we woke up, so the high today is pretty cool. I think it's only going up to like 65.
Oh, you poor guys.
I know, it's a shame, but well, we're in North Florida, so we don't get the benefit of having those southern Gulf breezes. We're just kind of like same latitude as like Panama City, just maybe an hour south of Georgia.
Hey, say hi to Joe Weiss.
Hey,
Joe,
Jake, how are you?
Nice to see you again.
I'm
How are you?
celebrating my son's college getting into the Fiesta Bowl.
Wonderful.
Oh yeah.
Congratulations.
Very exciting.
But I have another hat. I'll wear this one. I got the Liberty shirt, and I'll wear the Lake Forest Scouts hat with the arrow.
You gotta get one of those hats where it's double-sided. You can just flip it around.
Like Ray Rayner had back in the day with the Cubs in the socks.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
So is this
I will wear a hat. I feel stupid.
Are we recording for the show right now, or this is just preamble?
Pete starts the recording as soon as he wakes up. I mean,
He's got a GoPro strapped to his chest in the shower, and
it's not a pretty sight.
Right.
No,
it's not an experience. No, it's just three guys at the bar sitting down having a little chat. That's all. So this is what happens. We show up. We don't all get there at the same time, but we're here having a brew. And Joe says, "Who the hell is Jake Weisser? Who is Jake?"
I first thought you were mocking my name, Joe Weiss, Jake Weisser.
no, just a wonderful coincidence. No, so my name's Jake Weisser. I am a former resident of Lake Forest. I recently moved out of Illinois, and I just wanted to share my experience and what that was like. I was on the caucus committee for 2 years, did some volunteer work with them.
What years? Who was the president back then?
So the first year was Kim Fall, and then second year was Dave Hunt.
So we were there. We were on the caucus together.
Very briefly. Very briefly. I seem to remember
Uh,
there was a kerfuffle or some sort of disagreement, let's say.
uh,
Actually,
People
Pete,
wanted.
I don't know if you recall this conversation. I think we were in the Lantern, and it was, long after you had departed the caucus, and you had asked me, if there was going to be a vote, would you have voted against me? I'm like, probably. But I just wanted to tell you the truth and tell you honestly.
All
So,
right,
and
show
I think that
show's
you
over.
respected my honesty. So I appreciate that.
For the people that don't know, what was your experience of what happened back then? Because there's a whole bunch of different views what's going on, and there's no secrets anymore. What do you remember about back in the day when good old Pete Jansons was part of the caucus?
You know what? I think our tenure on the caucus overlapped so briefly, and I was so new that I was kind of, out of the frying pan and into the fire. I kind of didn't really have any sort of idea what was really going on. And I was vaguely familiar with the work you were doing on the podcast. I wasn't listening regularly or anything like that, but I did have a conversation with people on the executive committee, and they said, "Hey, we're having an issue. What's your thoughts?" and et cetera. And we shared our a conversation about that, and obviously it went the course that it did, and it never really came to have it being super contentious within the entire caucus committee. But yeah, I was so new to the whole process.
Yeah.
I really just I thought I was doing like interviews for boards and committees. Like all of a sudden now I'm deciding kind of personnel matters or having to give my input on it. And I was really just kind of confused by the whole thing in the beginning. But as time went on and I learned more about it, obviously, I kind of I don't want to say where I fall on how that went down, but it was definitely an interesting experience to get initiated into the caucus process.
Well, we had it was a similar situation, two different ways to handle things. Okay. I bowed out because the disagreements that I had with the executive committee, that was costing meeting time. So to get me out of the caucus, it would have probably been two more meetings. So I said, all right, man, peace out. I'm out of there. And our guy Phil Aruka, I don't know if you're familiar with that. He had a similar situation, and
Yep,
he
I was very much in the caucus when that was going on as well. So I'm very familiar with that.
so I guess there's two ways to handle a disagreement. I I don't even want to call it a fissure or is that a word fissure? There's a split, and you can go this way or that way. And this was part of the what's our buddy's name? Prue Bidler, Joe, good old Prue Bidler.
it's your buddy.
Not familiar. Who is
Oh, you
that?
ran into her at Gerhardt's.
No.
So were you part of the Prue Bidler? And I'm calling her Pidler because she calls me something else. So it's tit for tat. It's a high school thing. Were you part of that situation? Because you're in Florida now. You don't care. What were you part of picking Prue and Randy?
So yeah, I was on the caucus committee when we were making our mayoral selection. Let me preface anything I say by
Yeah.
saying that I don't represent the caucus committee. I'm no longer affiliated with them. Anything that I state is my opinion. So take that for what it's worth. But yeah, we were involved in that process. Again, of course, I come into the caucus committee at a time when there seems to be controversy kind of, all over the place. But, in terms of, I wasn't part of the selection committee. So the subcommittee for when they were drilling down into candidates, I was not part of that committee. I was just part of the general caucus when we had those interviews. I will say my personal opinion, I was not too impressed with Prue Beidler. I did not believe that she should be the candidate moving forward. I did support Randy Tack as the candidate. Ultimately, I think that was the right decision that the caucus came to. I believe that he has been a tremendous benefit for the city of Lake Forest. And sorry about that. I'm getting notifications. I thought I had turned off, but
Prue.
yeah. It's Prue Byler. Yeah, actually, she's emailing me right now. No, so overall, I was there that night when we had the quote unquote vote at the Gordon Center. Excuse me. And during that process, reading some of the things that people had written in on those, I'll call them ballots, but those slips of paper, they were very unkind. People took the liberty to write an essay about what they thought of the caucus and the process and why Prue Beidler should be the nominee instead of Randy Tack. And it was it started out as maybe slightly amusing, and then it quickly spiraled into, wow, this is really, a problem. This is not what we were expecting. When it comes to the process and everything else, again, I believe ultimately the caucus came to the right decision. I believe that Dr. Tack was the superior candidate, but it hasn't been without controversy. And we still see that kind of the ripples of that happening right now in the city of Lake Forest. I still try and keep up to date on what's going on and what's been happening, because in sincerity, I love the city of Lake Forest. It pains me to have left, but it's a wonderful place, and I wish the best for a city.
Jake, you were part of that process. You supported Dr. Tack, now Mayor Tack. And why do you think, and I know you've moved out of town, but why do you think it is that there's this faction of people, which turns out when we have an actual election, turns out to be the minority faction? Prue only got I think less than 40% of the vote. Why is it there, though, that there is this group that it seems to be all the issues with the caucus have to do with Dr. Tack, Mayor Tack? Yet when I've challenged him to say, what has he done since he's become mayor that you don't like, they've got no answer.
To be honest with you, Joe, I'm really unsure. I can only really speculate as to why it is. I am somewhat familiar with some of the people in Prue's circle. They seem to be generally just unhappy people in a lot of ways. So I think that maybe that spills over into what's going on. But I think part of it is that Lake Forest is kind of a holdout on the North Shore when it comes to typical right versus left politics.
Yeah.
I think that certain people who fall on the more progressive side don't see that as being a positive. They see that as being a negative. They want to have more contentious types of elections and that sort of thing, because I think that in the long run it does benefit them. However, when it comes to Dr. Tack and his accomplishments, I think that the problems that they found with Dr. Tack were very minuscule in comparison to the benefits that he's had for the city. So really, I think what it comes down to is there's a faction of people, a small faction, who would like to see Lake Forest become more like Highland Park or more like Deerfield or some of the surrounding communities. They don't really see the caucus process as being a benefit in a lot of ways, because it doesn't serve their ultimate goal, which is more city government, more government in general. Again, this is speculation. I'm not totally certain as to what their motivations are, but that would be what I'm supposing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we've talked about this before on the show, that Lake Forest is a very moderate community, that the Trump style Republican doesn't do well here, but the Mark Kirk style Republican does. And that you can see that in election results over the years here, and they tried to make it an R versus D thing last time, and it backfired on them. And like I said earlier, the results speak for themselves. Dr. Tack, in the actual election, when everybody voted, or anyone in the community voted, the results were, I mean, it was a landslide. He won.
Oh, no, absolutely. And, just from my experience sitting on the caucus committee, being in those discussions inside of the Gorton Center or wherever we were meeting, it never became about identity politics. Well, he leans this way or he leans that way. It really came down to, what's his goals for the city? Does he have the knowledge? Does he have the experience? Does he have the personality in order to be a successful mayor? It never really revolved around what side of the aisle he came down on or she came down on or anything like that. Really, when it came down to it at the end of the day, it was about selecting a person whom we felt really represented the ideas of Lake Forest, who could really advance our community, and that was Dr. Tack, or Mayor Tack, I should say. Honestly, if I could summarize Prue Beidler's interview with the caucus committee, I would say it was unimpressive. It really felt like she was entitled. I didn't really believe that she was sincere in a lot of ways. And you see it. Their biggest detraction about Dr. Tack was about the railroad, right? And his unwillingness to plunge the city into legal warfare. And look how that turned out for the surrounding communities. I mean, I think it was a boondoggle. It was a waste of money. And ultimately, I think he was vindicated.
Glenview got taken to the cleaners on that one by consultants.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you look at that debate, we're talking about leaf blowers, like this is not, this is not what's moving the needle, right, for the community. We have some serious challenges in Lake Forest. And that's every community around the state, has various challenges. But let's really get down into the things that are serious, that affect the day-to-day lives of citizens in the community, and will ultimately, keep us in the position that we're in, because Lake Forest is really at a tremendous advantage, in comparison to a lot of our surrounding peers and our neighbors. I think that it's a tremendous waste of resources. It's a tremendous waste of time to try and make it about political identity, or it's about gender, or it's about this or that. It's really, it's disappointing, I guess, is what I would say.
And we just this past week was the deadline for filing for to run for office, and there are aldermanic elections next year. There's going to be actually 4 because of the vacancy that was created. And the caucus slate, we now know the caucus slate will be unopposed. That no one filed in any of the aldermanic elections to run on the ballot. I suppose somebody could still run as a write-in, but that's hard to pull off. But so back to what you just said, it seems like life's pretty good here, because when things are heavily contested, that means there's people are upset. I mean, the mayor of Chicago just got voted out of office, and I wouldn't be surprised if the current one gets voted out when his term ends. But life's pretty good here, right? I mean, people are pretty happy. I mean, in spite of you leaving.
Yeah, and my motivation to leave was less about the city of Lake Forest. It had more to do with, Lake Forest has some very unfortunate geography, that it's located within the boundaries of Illinois. So,
Yes.
that's really.
I'd say that myself. I wish we were Lake Forest, Florida. That would be perfect.
Yes. But that's not to say that Lake Forest doesn't have a lot of challenges and opportunities ahead of it. And I do think there are certain things about the city that I would like to see change. But overall, I would say that we're head and shoulders above any other community. And, if I was ever going to move back to Illinois, which isn't within the scope of possibility, it's very small, but it's within the scope, I would only choose to live in Lake Forest. I really love that community. The time that I lived there for a little over 6 years, it was fantastic. One of my children was born there. My other one came, he was 4 years old, I believe. So the major formative years of his youth are kind of embedded. He has roots there. Still talks to his friends there every single day. It's a fantastic place for families. It's a fantastic place for people to create a community. And I really can't say enough positive things about it.
You were in the caucus, and you were there for a short period of time when I was there, and it is still the best game in town, because the alternative is you can just, whoever has the most money can go up for mayor, or all that.
Whoever can shout the loudest.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Joe O'Reilly's coming into leadership next year. Strong guy, good guy. My opinion only, we've had a weak stretch of leadership on the caucus, where somebody needed to stand up, stand forward to set the tone of what is or isn't going to happen. The caucus is a vetting machine. It is an HR process. Like you said at the beginning, you're going to interview people. You're an agenda detector, right? Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Now, couple things that need to happen on the caucus because it's still the best game in town, but it's got some warts, and we got to correct it. And some of the things that I brought up during my term was one, the old versus new. When you're coming in, okay, a third of the people that are coming in are new, and a third are old that are leaving. When you're coming in, you don't know what the old issues were in the past, and the people that did know were leaving. There was no way to transfer that information in the old versus new meeting. Did you experience anything like that?
Yeah, I would say that there was definitely a lot of runway that was needed in order to get up to speed on the previous issues that had happened. At the time that I joined the caucus committee, I had lived in Lake Forest for a few years, but obviously having a young family and a career, you don't necessarily pay really close attention to everything that's going on in the inner workings of local politics. But I did see it as a good opportunity to volunteer and become more involved, which is why I decided to join.
And it,
Um,
and so were you in how long were you in Lake Forest before you joined the caucus?
about 4 years.
Okay. Because there's
Yeah.
some people that I've witnessed that we were when you and I were on together that just moved into town less than a year, and then the next thing they're on the executive committee. I
Mhm.
don't I don't know if that's the best thing to do. Maybe they do. Because whoever is the president picks the vice president, and the vice president turns into the president, and the president gets to pick who they want to surround themselves with.
Mhm.
And because I'm sure you've heard, it's like the old boys, old girls network of, friends, getting together. It's not necessarily the best people for the position, but it's who the president wants. Did you experience that?
So, let me figure out where I want to start with this. So let me unpack that. As far as it being a good process or a bad process, I can kind of see both sides of it. I do understand, your concept where maybe it should be more democratic, where the caucus committee is helping select those people. I do also kind of see the argument that having the executive leadership choose their successors and identify those people that really stand out might be better, just because they have more day-to-day involvement with certain people. I was asked to be on the executive committee just at the end of my first year. I turned down the position, actually. And the reason why was the caucus committee was already a significant time commitment for me. And I was asked to be the treasurer. And having, my wife and I run multiple businesses, we have a very crazy lifestyle, in terms of time. I was really concerned that I would not be able to fulfill my duties properly because the treasurer has a lot of responsibilities when it comes to filing deadlines, reports, that sorts of thing. So that's why I turned it down. So I did have an opportunity to be on the executive committee. That being said, you know, your uh, your point about the leadership being quote unquote weak over the last few years. I don't know how much I generally agree with you on that. I do think the caucus has a lot of sort of problems that they've been working through, and these problems have taken years and years and years to develop to where they are now. So I don't necessarily cast too much fault at the feet of the executive committee. I think that they're doing the best they can with the limited resources that they have. Because at the end of the day, the caucus committee is a PAC. We're not a necessarily an enshrined sort of institution within city government or anything like that. We're not affiliated per se or directly with the city. We're really there to serve the interests of the citizens of Lake Forest, the voters of Lake Forest. So I think that we're doing the best we can with what we got. When we look recently with the bylaw changes that were proposed, I think the overall goal is to kind of remove some of that ambiguity, the language, in order to clarify exactly what it is that we do and the procedure that we follow. And the chief complaint that people had is the good old boys club, where we're making decisions in the smoke filled rooms, and it's not like that at all. I think that one of the biggest challenges that the caucus has is just general lack of knowledge about what it is that we do, the mission that we serve, the process that we use to go about doing it. There's not as much engagement as there should be, with the caucus committee from the average voter. And part of that comes down to, we rely on volunteers. We're really dependent on people to raise their hand and say, yes, I'm interested. I want to help. I want to be part of the process. And a lot of the same names come up over and over again because the universe of people who raise their hand and say, yeah, I want to volunteer is small in comparison to the overall body of voters within the city. So, they really have, we have a tremendous advantage too when it comes to other communities, which is we have some of the most talented, intelligent, motivated people who live within Lake Forest. And the trouble is that a lot of them don't want to stick their neck out there. They can't make the time commitment, or maybe they're new to the city. We've had significant turnover in the residents in the city in the last 4 years. So a lot of them, maybe they're raising their young families. They don't have the time, or they just don't know who we are and what we do. And the caucus over the last couple of years, I think, has really stepped up their efforts in outreach, in terms of social media and other ways to contact people to educate about the mission of the caucus. But it's going to take time really for people to embrace it and understand what it is that we're doing.
The vetting process, that's the number one goal of the caucus. Would you agree, Jake?
I would say so.
Okay. So you're interviewing a lot of people. Did anybody ever give you a course on how to interview? Now you run a lot of businesses, so you're experienced with it, but there are a lot of people that don't. And the laws of recency, all that stuff that comes into interviewing. Do you think the caucus would be served with somebody kind of going over an interview course or something to help them ask the right questions?
So I think more information is always better than less information. Within the orientation of the caucus committee, I do believe that there's some, slides that we are given, just about interviewing and that process and types of questions. Even before we're presented with an interview, there's, kind of boilerplate questions that are provided that we can ask to potential candidates that are kind of standard that, are a good way to take people's temperature on things. So that's helpful. But yeah, of course, if you can, the problem is that not every person out there is going to be able to devote the time and effort to really become an expert job interviewer, right? But I think that enough people within our community, they're intelligent enough to kind of try and pierce the veil and figure out, do people have an agenda? Why is it that they're trying to volunteer for this board or this committee? I give people a lot of credit. I don't think that you need to really have too much training in order to, be, a person who's fair, impartial, ask the right questions, try and really figure out if a person's qualified for a position, compare and contrast them against other potential candidates. I don't think that you need to have a PhD, in human resources in order to accomplish that.
Well, it is an HR job, and some people could use the help. I don't know, Jake. My last question, I'll let Joe get a couple in. The vetting process, is it what when you're going to vet, you're going to look at somebody's background. I just want to say, Prue, when I'm interviewing somebody, I'm going to do a social media search. I'm going to see what's going to, come up, and literally millions of dollars, over a million, over $1 million came up that she donated one way. Do you think that's appropriate to look up to see if because if you're an agenda detector and you see $1 million going to one political party, would that be a red flag in your case, Jake?
So this topic actually came up towards the end when I was leaving after the session had ended for the year. And I was in discussions with other ward chairs and things of this nature, trying to figure out, okay, well, what level of background searching is appropriate? So obviously people are, again, we don't judge people, right? And again, I'm not part of the caucus anymore, so I say we in the general we, but you don't necessarily say, well, this person is in this political party, so they're unacceptable, or this person is in this political party. We only want people who are totally independent, who's never donated to anybody. We're not considering that. It's really about, again, trying to find people who are there in order to advance a certain agenda, and, sniff out if they're trying to really improve the city as a whole. So, there's discussions like how deep do you want to go on social media? Are we hiring private investigators to figure out, what people do in their private lives? I think that's kind of silly. This is America. It's not China. I think that the idea that, there's some sort of litmus test that you need to pass in order to be involved in the community is silly. And I think that it's un-American, but you do have to look at things on the whole, so any one piece of information.
$1 million, Jake, $1 million.
Hey, but she's a millionaire. $1 million to her is like, $20 to you and me. So
I'm not talking 1,000. I'm not talking 100. I'm talking about $1 million. Yeah, Joe.
So yeah, I was just going to add on. I think it was a series of things, in my opinion. And Jake, you can weigh in on this. It was a series of things. I was the one that I got on this show in the first place because I'm the one that actually I was the first one that went to the federal election website and the state election website and put all the data together and came up with the $1 million number. So, so I brought that up. But I think the thing that, and Jake, you weigh in on this, the thing that I got a lot of people was the Kim Foxx business.
Absolutely.
And by extension, Eric Reinhardt. Look, Dick Durbin, Joe Biden, whatever, Tammy Duckworth, all the other donations, people are like, whatever. But she was literally the only resident of Lake Forest to give money to Kim Foxx. Then the whole issue came out about her daughter-in-law working for Kim Foxx, and she never ever addressed it fully in the campaign. So it kind of just hung out there, and it may have just been a coincidence, but we'll never know. She never addressed it. But that really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way because, the whole law enforcement issue, that this is a community that's very supportive of law enforcement and is very concerned about what's going on with, the cops' hard work being undone by these bad prosecutors like Kim Foxx and Eric Reinhardt. But how much of that came into discussion at that point, or did that come up later on once she ran as a quote unquote independent?
So I would say, again, part of the caucus process is we don't really discuss details of conversations.
What happens in the caucus stays in the caucus. That's a very good point.
But, I think that on the whole, that wasn't necessarily a topic that was emphasized, but privately with other caucus members, I would say that, we did have discussions amongst each other, say, hey, did you see this? Did you read this? What are your thoughts on this? And, it's something that is taken into consideration, I think, for a lot of the people. I think some people would ignore it, and say, I'm not going to let that cloud, whether or not she's capable and willing and able to serve the city. But I think that, to your point, it's kind of cumulative, right? So, if I'm sitting down and I'm getting a bad vibe in an interview, and then there's other information that comes out, and then I read something else, then I'm saying, okay, well, I can kind of follow a little bit of a bread trail here and see, like, okay, is this person really a good fit? Is this going to be a person who unites the city? Is this going to be a divisive person? We definitely have to, evaluate all information. I think more information is always better than less information. I think I said that before, but it's relevant in a lot of ways. Should it be the only deciding factor on whether or not a person is selected? No, I don't think so. I think that people are entitled to, have their political opinions, and really, money is speech, right? When we talk about free speech and we talk about the Supreme Court case, the name is escaping me right now, but
we'll put it right here.
Money is speech, right? So
about. I know it well, but I can't remember the name.
I can't think of the name of it. Yeah, sorry, I'm having.
I almost said Janice versus Ask Me, but that's a different Supreme Court.
No, that's something else. It'll come to me after we finish. But people are certainly entitled to have political opinions, and they're allowed to use their finances in order to express those opinions, whether that's donating to a candidate or a cause. When the issue of her donations came up, those are the donations that we can track. Obviously we know about dark money in politics, and who knows, what the actual number might be. But, again, I kind of just want to bring it around. My decision when it came to that was really about the interview. And I was just kind of unimpressed. And I felt that, she was entitled. She felt like it was her turn, and, we were supposed to just kind of rubber stamp it. And, at the end of the day, that wasn't the case.
Citizens United was versus FEC was the.
Thank you. Citizens United. Exactly.
Yeah, but you brought up the dark money part, and that's a concern. She played games. I mean, first of all, unprecedented the amount of money she put in to that election for a job that pays $10 a year.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, she put in almost $200,000, which again, I understand as a percentage of her family income is.
Yeah, but it made the caucus have to come up with that.
But then the caucus had to go out,
Right.
find donors to match that. And I came forward. Here I was the new guy. I kind of took your place in the city here, Jake, as a resident.
I appreciate it.
But I came forward because she was everywhere. She was on. My son couldn't open a YouTube video without seeing a Prue Beidler ad.
It was kind of obnoxious, wasn't it?
Yeah, and she was knocking on doors, including mine. We were getting mail, and there was nothing at that point from the caucus. I'm like, oh my God, she is going to just buy her way into this office. And meanwhile, she's running around saying she's nonpartisan and bipartisan, and so I came forward to correct that. But then towards the end, the caucus did match her. I mean, when there was a Prue mailer, there was a caucus mailer. The caucus started doing online ads, but that stuff costs money.
Of course.
And they had to go out and raise that. And it really just, the concern is that, that you're going to price, if this continues, you're going to have to be rich to hold public office. I mean, we see that now at the
or you need significant backing from a political party. You have to be a Republican or a Democrat because you're really just at that point you're no longer a politician. You're just a fundraiser. So yeah, it's really damaging to the whole process, especially since in Lake Forest our process for generations has been to avoid that, to really go out and endeavor to find really highly qualified people within the community. It's disappointing. But I mean, that's America in 2023, right? Everything's kind of bifurcated.
Jake, Joe, is that what Highland Park's doing?
I think Highland Park has basically become an extension of the Lake County Democratic Party.
But didn't they started this way with the caucus that we have, and it turned into.
I don't know I don't know the history on Highland Park. I can tell you the history on Northbrook. Northbrook used to be a bipartisan caucus. Now in Northbrook, the current mayor or village president sits on the dais with J.B. Pritzker and all the Democrats at the annual Democratic Party dinner, and they have basically purged all the Republicans out of their caucus. So I think they still have a caucus, but you have to be a Democrat in order.
Caucus in name only.
Yeah.
So Jake, if this is happening, kind of what I'm seeing, just sitting in this chair, being on the caucus with you, and then getting this podcast going on the Prue Beidler situation, I could be way off, but I'm generally kind of close. I see something with Prue Beidler. I see something with Julie Morrison. I see something with Susan Garrett, and now Melanie Rummel, all coming together to, not sure what they're doing, but it's like, is Prue going to be the next state senator to get it from Morrison? Is Rummel going to come in and try to contest, next year to get this little clique going that they have to turn Lake Forest into Highland Park? That's what I'm sniffing. Jake, your thoughts, and Joe?
That's a really good observation, Pete. I don't know. There does seem to be quite an alliance there with those people. Whether or not she's trying to build some sort of team around her for some sort of future political endeavor, that remains to be seen. But it wouldn't strike me as being out of the scope, based upon what I've seen so far. Again, I'm not in the community anymore, so day to day, I don't really have a lot of information on what's been going on. But I do see that as potentially being, the future course. So I would say, tinfoil hat time, put it on. Yeah, definitely. She's going.
Well, in fairness, I don't know. A couple of things though. One, the caucus is not Republican either. Let's make that very clear. The caucus there are Eric Oskarian, third ward alderman, is a Democratic precinct committee person
My
in Lake
favorite
County.
donkey.
And there's a couple others that I think would, if you were to pull their primary ballot history, lean D. So I think it's important. Look, I'm a Republican. I don't shy away from that, but I've always worked with Democrats, and more importantly, I think it's important that you have bipartisanship. I don't want to turn Lake Forest red or blue. I want it to stay purple.
Yeah, but this crew with the money,
Yeah, they wanted to turn it blue.
well, they hang out at the Lake Forest bookstore. This is Pete Jansons saying it. That's the Democratic headquarters. We're all four of them in there.
Really?
They're all in cahoots. They are. That's what they
They were
do.
the Shields Township Democrats meet.
But they go in there, and
I thought they met at Lake Forest Place.
well, that's where they get their voters from. But people need to know that there's this clique of money that, look, they can do whatever they want. Like you said, Jake, it's America, but it's also America where people need to know what's going on. Because if you care, you want to know this is what's behind the scenes. And every time that Melanie Rummel's asked, does she want to be mayor? Holy crap, does she explode? So
But
that
I'm going to give one defense of Melanie Rummel here.
yeah.
She is not. Melanie is a Republican. Her husband was a Republican, was former mayor, later became a Republican member of the Lake County Board until he was voted out by a candidate who was financially supported by Prue Beidler. But point being, so Melanie is a Republican. Her and her husband do continue to support the Shields Township Republican organization, go to their events and stuff. I've seen them there. But she, to your point, Pete, she has dodged the question of is she running for mayor? It's a simple yes, no, or I'm still thinking about it answer, and she won't give any answer to it. And a lot of people involved in stuff think she might be trying to run against a mayor tack.
Of course she is. My point is she part of that clique of Morrison, Garrett, and Beidler? Because look, if they run a contested election, okay, because I don't know what the caucus is going to do next. I can't see past Joe Reedy, who I'm a big fan of, that I think will go in and correct a lot of things. I do believe that. But eventually you stack up, you get enough people. Because what I'm seeing on the caucuses, at least when I was there, Jake, the attendance at the meetings wasn't very good. Maybe it was half. Okay. And if it's half, do you really need 9 people per ward? Because it's better to have, no breath than bad breath. If you can get half the people that are passionate to show up versus people that just show up here and there and they cast a vote, I don't know how well that vote is. Do you think we need less people, or should be by how many people are in the ward? I don't want to get too complicated, but 9 per ward and the lack of passion, because these votes are going to become crucial. You're going to have to unpack a lot, Jake. I'm sorry, but you get the wrong person. You get the wrong person as the president. That can set the tone on the caucus. You get the wrong person as mayor. They can go in and reject all the candidates that the caucus puts in, and they're in a position of power where they can stack the deck on the people who they want. All right, unpack, Jake.
Oh my gosh, Pete, you're wonderful. So where do I start? Let me start with Joe Reedy. Spent a lot of time with Joe. Fantastic person. I think that he's going to do a fantastic job next year when he's president. Very serious. He takes this seriously. He has a lot of passion for this, and it's genuine. You can really tell that he wants to elevate the caucus from where it is now into the place where it needs to be within the community. As far as the amount of people in each individual ward, let me first start out by saying I was on Ward 4. I think we consistently set the attendance record. We're almost all of us there every single meeting. So shout out to my Ward 4 people. Way to go. But I think that part of the issue you run into is if you were to, let's say, base the amount of chairs for each ward, or not chairs, I'm sorry, persons for each ward based upon the population of the ward, what you really can run into is people feeling like they're not represented enough. Really, the goal of the caucus or an alderman, let's just use alderman for an example, because they represent a ward. They have to represent the city as a whole first and the interests of their ward. They can't just pick, well, my ward's the best ward and we're going to get all the resources and I'm going to just advocate for anything that happens in my ward. No, they really need to be an advocate for the city as a whole. Yes, emphasize on the issues that are within your ward. Reach out to the communities of your ward, make sure they get connected with the right people within the city government in order to take care of any problems they may have. So I think that creating a system by which it's dictated by population would maybe feel other communities or areas of Lake Forest to be feeling disenfranchised, like they don't have an equal seat at the table. So I don't necessarily believe that that's the correct way to go about that. As far as the number of people, I think that 9 per ward is good. To your point, if only half show up, you're going to need a quorum. You don't want 15 people deciding for the caucus committee. You really want to have more people sharing their voice. So having 43 people there voting, I think is ideal. I would love it if there was full attendance at every single meeting. Obviously, there's other conflicts within people's lives that prevent them sometimes from going to meetings. But I would say that the last year, I would say, coming out of COVID, I think part of the issue was during COVID when things were remote, certain people were comfortable meeting in person. I think that year was particularly difficult as far as attendance goes. The following year, I did notice that attendance was much better. So I don't know what it is right now, but I think that it's right. I think that they've got the system figured out. It's worked for, however many years. I don't necessarily think it needs to change.
Fair enough.
What about the whole term limits thing? And we touched a little bit about it before, but everything in this city is basically term limited. Mayor, city council, all the commissions, the caucus, everything is term limited. And, we've seen the excesses of not having term limits in other communities where, that people were mayor for like 50 years in some cities and ended up going to jail. But here in Lake Forest, we've really kept it that there's no political boss, that it kind of, people come in and out. But to Pete's point, you have all this turnover and people are very, very busy today with their career, with their family, other stuff. Where's the balance here on this to not have people there forever, but to have some type of legacy where you have people that have been around the block on this, so the caucus is not constantly reinventing the wheel?
That's a really good question, Joe. I don't have a crystal ball to tell you what exactly the right number of terms is. I think that it's dependent on the board or committee, and I think that each one should be evaluated independently and figure out, how much knowledge or, experience is needed in order to have somebody really carry the mission of that board or committee forward. I would say that it might be helpful to have some sort of formal kind of mentorship sort of program in place for some of these boards and committees where people who are coming on who maybe don't have as much experience, they could learn about the history of the board and where they've come. For the most part, I think the people who are interviewing for these positions, they do take a good amount of due diligence to research, what's been happening, with those boards and that sort of thing. But as far as how many terms you should get, I don't know, but I am a fan of term limits. I think that they're a net positive. I don't really favor the idea of somebody becoming sort of like a monarch, within city government where you look at the Stevens or the Dailies or, something like that. You can make an argument either way that those people did tremendous things for their cities. But I do think on the whole, for a community like ours, term limits are the correct way to go.
Jake, part of the premise of this show, again, is sitting at a bar, we're talking, we're shooting it, and nobody likes anybody when you're having a conversation with them that they just say, this is wrong, that's wrong, you could say something's wrong as long as you have a solution to offer, good or bad, after you point the problem out. And that's what we try to do with this show. Do you got any suggestions or solutions? You're in Florida now, you're going to be on an executive committee and in a critique, what would be a couple things you would suggest in priority that the caucus needs to do to improve itself as when Joe O'Ready comes in? It's not against Joe O'Ready, but it's the system in place. What would you offer to change to improve it?
Sure. And I'm happy to talk about things for the city in general too, just some suggestions
Yeah,
that I
go
would
ahead.
have. But as far as the caucus committee goes, obviously education and outreach, as I mentioned before, we have a significant portion of the citizens within Lake Forest are new within the last few years with COVID and everything else. So educating them, getting them up to speed on who the caucus committee is, why we exist, what our goal is, what's the mission, to kind of peel back the veil a little bit, because sometimes people, they get the postcard in the mail and it's a write-in thing like vote for this person to be on your ward committee, and they're like, I've never met this guy, I don't know who he is, and they're coming maybe from an area where the caucus process is foreign to them. They've never experienced anything like this before. So really educating people, making sure they understand what the caucus is. Transparency, that's something that's come up in the last few months, in a more prominent way. So maintaining, the problem is you have to maintain the confidentiality, because again, at the end of the day, these are job interviews. This is not a function of the city. This is a PAC. So, we don't necessarily follow the same exact rules that people maybe are familiar with, but trying to increase the transparency, have people sit in more open meetings, that sort of thing, I think would be a benefit for the caucus. Because really, people are afraid of what they don't know. They get upset and they get angry when they don't have complete information. So just increasing the amount of information that's available, encouraging people to participate, volunteers. How many times we're seeing the same people just kind of go from committee to committee to committee, and again, nothing against them. That's fine. They want to be involved in civic government. I applaud them. But for some people in the community, they may see that as being, oh, this is good old boys club. And really, it's not a function of that. It's a function of the universe of people who are available, ready, willing, and able to volunteer for those roles. And sometimes, we have to choose from who we have. We're not going to go outside of Lake Forest, right? This is for citizens of our community. So we're really dependent on people raising their hand and volunteering. So really upping the effort to get people to volunteer and say, hey, I'm available. I want to be involved.
How did you volunteer? Tell us how you.
Yeah, so a neighbor of mine within the ward, our children were friends from elementary school. So we had been friends for quite a while, and he got involved with the caucus committee through one of his neighbors because somebody had resigned, and he had been doing it for a while. And he said, "Oh, this is really interesting." I said, "Oh yeah, like keep me in mind if there's a position that opens up or something, I'd be interested in doing it." And it just so happened a few months later, there was another person who had to leave the caucus committee prematurely. So they came in, they said, "Hey, are you still interested?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So we had a Zoom interview like this. It was me, I believe Dave Hunt, was it Tim O'Neill, or no, not
Mike O'Neill?
I can't remember, whoever. And we had a conversation like this, and they said, well, why do you want to volunteer? Why do you want to be involved? Again, and I said, you know what? I love living here. I want to make it great. I want to be a steward for our community. And that's how I got involved. And like I said, I filled out somebody's term for 2 years. I actually think I had another year left that I could have stayed on. And then if I went on to exec, I could have stayed on longer, but the stars didn't really align for that. But yeah, I was basically asked, somebody said, "Hey, are you still interested?" I said, "Yeah, sure." And the caucus committee has something called a VPS, right? It's a volunteer profile sheet where you go online, you fill in, basically it's almost like a resume. Hey, these are the things I'm interested in. This is my background, et cetera, et cetera. Just a quick little bio about you. And I didn't even fill one of those out. It was just like, oh, hey, come on in. And so then I learned, oh, this thing exists, whatever. I had to go in and fill it out before I actually got kind of confirmed to be in the caucus committee. But I think that a lot of people just don't even realize, hey, I got to fill out one of these things, because otherwise people don't know that I'm here and I'm available. So really, and then going through that database also and figuring out, okay, who are the people who left the community, who's moved out, who are the really, engaged people who we can go to and say, hey, do you want to be on library board, or do you want to be on audit, or whatever. I think that really finding that talent pool and cleaning it out and make sure that we have a really accurate representation of the people who want to be involved and want to share their time and their resources and their knowledge, that's going to really advance the caucus to get really highly qualified people in there.
To your point, Jake, so the the external communications person, that's a critical piece, right? Because they're the
Absolutely.
ones that get the message out. Because if you don't do it on a regular basis, if you don't have a basic knowledge of constant contact and how to use it and how to manage a drip campaign, because politics only matters unless it affects you. And I think people are going to start figuring it out right about now when that tax bill hits, not you, Jake, but us, where we're going to get hit with another $1,000.
Right.
If you don't pay attention what's going on, because like Joe says, everybody pays attention to the national elections, but the local stuff that really affects us, people don't. And the consequences of not knowing what's going on and not knowing what the votes are on that referendum is $1,000. The external communications, number one, to get people on the caucus. Number two, the caucus is the one that picks the school board, right? Okay.
Well, no, the voters pick the school board, but the caucus is recommending candidates.
And I don't want to get into what everybody's saying is, well, there's not much of a choice. There's only one person. So
well, I would encourage people to volunteer and put themselves out there if they believe that they have better ideas and they can bring a better vision and it will lead the community in a better way. Absolutely, step forward. That's what we need.
So external communications, very key.
Social media
and all that. So that's a very key, based on what everybody says, getting the word out. Okay. When I hear getting the word out in the advertising game, to me, that sounds just burning money. Okay. There needs to be a schedule that adhered to, that constantly goes out, where people need to understand. The VPS, we're using an acronym, and people like to use acronyms to sound smart, and people don't want to say, hey, I don't know what that means. Get rid of that damn application, caucus application, right? Put that out there. That should be out there, once a month, where people constant contact. It's automated. So that external communication share. Joe Aridi, I know you're not listening. And I know you're not watching, but whoever's that person, that is key. And then whoever the vice president is going to be for next year, because that's going to be the president's, that's key. Jake, do you have anything else you like to bring up? Because we're starting to wind down here, and I know you had a lot of stuff, and I know I gave you a lot of stuff to unpack. So did Joe. What didn't we cover that you want to get across?
Really the primary goal for me to come on to the podcast and share my experience with the people in Lake Forest, your viewers, your listeners, is just let them know that the reason why I chose to leave. I believe this is a dilemma that a lot of people are facing. I do, again, I sound like a broken record, and I love Lake Forest. I think that we're in a much better position than a lot of other communities, but I think that Lake Forest has some significant challenges in front of it. And you mentioned the tax increase. That was one of the motivations for me deciding to pack up my tent and go.
And that's a school tax increase, not the city.
Correct.
School district.
Correct. Yeah, we're talking about the school with the renovations for Lake Forest High School. Seeing that come down the pike, and then just knowing in the back of my mind, it's probably not too far off in the distant future. There's going to be another referendum for Deer Path. So that's going to be another tax increase that's probably going to be hitting us in the next few years. I made notes, so forgive me if I'm looking away. I kind of broke it down into a few different categories. Education being one, the business environment, culture, those sorts of things. Those are the reasons. If we look at education, we stand out on the North Shore as having some pretty great schools. We have Stevenson, we have New Trier, we have GBN, Lake Forest High School. You can go down the list and see where we rank. But I really do feel like we're behind in a lot of ways. With COVID and everything else that's happened, I don't think that the students are necessarily getting the best education they possibly can. So, and different organizations trying to raise awareness that, hey, maybe, our test scores aren't as good as they could be. And maybe there's other things that we can be doing. But for me, I have two children. My older son is in 5th grade now. So he was going into 5th grade when we decided to leave. So he was going to be starting at Deer Path. My younger son he started 1st grade this year. So he's turning 7 next week. Happy birthday, Michael. If you watch, you probably don't. But,
happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Okay.
But really, for me, sending my children into middle school, I mean, obviously, we've seen very recently there's an issue with a faculty member at DPM. That's been on my radar for a long time. That hey, there's certain people within our schools who maybe shouldn't be there, shouldn't be around children. I don't think that the vetting process is really structured in a way to get rid of bad teachers or bad faculty members or bad staff. I think that there's a lot of protection that's afforded from unions, and I think that it just wasn't the right place. The woke stuff, I fall very far on the right in terms of my political affiliation. I'm not afraid to admit it. I think that some of the woke nonsense that's creeping into schools, I think that it has a negative effect on our community. I don't think it really brings out the best in who we are. I think it really just serves as a way to divide people and make them resentful, and that's easier for them to be controlled in the future. So I don't subscribe to that. As far as the new teacher contract goes, District 115, we see that they're getting a raise. And I forget, was it Sally Davis, or was it, who was it who had the quote that say that, oh, it was painless, and,
that was easy.
Or that was easy. Yeah. Or whatever.
I get the bill.
Yeah. If that's your reaction to a negotiation, I can tell you with a decent amount of certainty, you did not come on did not come out on the better end of it. You were definitely taken to the cleaners. That's not to say that the teachers don't perform an important role. They're obviously vital. However, their compensation has to be commensurate with, what's actually able to be afforded by the taxpayers, because at the end of the day, we're writing the checks. So yeah, property taxes was a huge deal. State income tax, obviously that was a huge motivator for me. Just trying to go to a place that had a more conducive environment for business, and bringing up the subject of business, Lake Forest, their tax basis is heavily dependent on residential real estate. Everybody is very focused on the value of their home, as they should be. That's a huge investment for a lot of people. But the issue that we have is we don't have a very good balance between commercial sort of tax basis and residential tax basis. It's very heavily skewed. So figuring out ways that we can attract businesses to Lake Forest to bring their employees, bring their tax revenue, et cetera. I know that we talk about restaurants a lot. Hey, we're opening a new restaurant. There's Sophia Steak, there's Lake Colonial, there's Toco that's coming very soon. Shout out to Bruno, one of the best restaurants. I'm going to be there next week. So Bruno, he's the best. But we have a need to really attract businesses to our community that are going to help support the tax basis. And if you look on the west side of Lake Forest, I don't want to bring up the whole Costco thing, because I think that's been beaten to death. Yeah, that's been beaten to death. I don't want to rehash that whole thing, but those office buildings that are on the east side of 94, a lot of them are not full. Post COVID. We have to figure out ways to really attract businesses, and being within Illinois, that's difficult. I understand that a lot of businesses are leaving, but it's in a way unfair to the citizens of the city to endure the entire tax burden. And I embellishing a little bit. It's not the entire tax burden, but it's the lion's share of it. So I think that being able to find leadership within the city who's going to be very proactive in searching that out and finding the key players who can make that happen, that's going to be important. And some people might say, well, that's why we need somebody who's really politically connected to be the mayor, because we need to go down to Springfield and suck out all the money we can, or whatever. I understand the argument. I don't agree with the argument. You can still be a leader and a connector and somebody who can really advance the cause of the city without having those deep entrenched political kind of organs, let's say. So
organs, just right.
Organs.
Well, Mayor Tack just got the funding. I mean, Mayor Tack did his job and appeared with Governor Pritzker I
saw that in the newspaper. I saw a picture of it. So I read the Lake McHenry Scanner quite often, and I saw that picture, and I was kind of nervous for Mayor Tack because he looked like JB Pritzker might eat him. So,
but seriously, I think I think they have made it a point to say, hey, look, when elections are over, we work with whoever wins.
Sure.
And
And
Pritzker won by as much of a landslide over
it's this
the
whole
unelectable
idea.
Darren Bailey as Randy did over Prue Beidler.
Well,
Right?
there's certain people who make the argument that Darren Bailey was hand chosen by J.B. Pritzker, in order to be the candidate. Yeah. But, to what I was going to say is it's the whole idea of you got to date with the girl or dance with the girl who brung you. Right. And so you look at certain like infrastructure projects, let's say we look at the pumping station or, reconstruction of some of our infrastructure, and we get state money. We get money from IDOT or whomever. And that's not to say that that's a bad thing, that we need to be just completely financially independent from the state. I think that that's kind of foolish. But you do want people who are going to be able to go out there and find that state grant or find that funding that's available to really make sure that we're doing our due diligence and we're being good fiduciaries for the citizens. But at the same time, at the end of the day, I think it's going to be private endeavors within the city that are really going to, make the city flourish. It's not infrastructure projects. It's going to be creating community, creating, the downtown area it's beautiful, historic. It's great to look at. It's great to shop there, but making sure that those shop owners, that they're, supported, that they have, they feel like the city's got their back when it comes to, them doing business. So, restaurants are great, new businesses are great, but we need to make sure that we're utilizing, all of the commercial sort of real estate that we have available within the city in order to alleviate that tax burden from citizens.
Jake, what do you like the most about being in Florida?
There's a lot of things. I think that for me, it's a little bit more peaceful. I've been able to simplify my life tremendously. I don't have two cars anymore. I have one car and I have a golf cart that I kind of zip around on and go to the grocery store and do whatever. So for me, really just mental health. I'm born and raised in the Chicago area. I'm from Buffalo Grove. My wife's from Glenview. I've spent my entire lifetime there, 40 years. And I miss it tremendously. But it was getting to a point where I always felt there's a constant competition for resources. There's a competition for everything. And it was just this push and pull was just too much for us. And, there was an opportunity that presented itself to us. And we decided to move on it. I think that for my wife and I, really the stars aligned. But, if you look at the primary motivator, it was really my children. I wanted to make sure that they were going to have a childhood in a place that was more aligned with our values, that was more aligned with the lifestyle and the pace that we wanted to have. And that's why we chose Florida. I mean, big thing, talk about education, universal school choice. I moved down here. I was a citizen of Florida. Yeah. So I was a resident of Florida for about a week, and I received a voucher to send my children to private school.
There you go.
And it worked out really well. And, we're building a home right now, and the home that we're building, it's in a great school district, but unfortunately it's busting at the seams. We've seen tremendous growth in this area. So, we decided that we were going to send our kids to a parochial school. And having that voucher there really just helped make that decision so much easier. That, we said, hey, this is in our interest. It's worth it. So we add up reducing our personal income tax obligations. We add up, just everyone talks about the weather. Yeah, weather. Yeah, I don't like shoveling snow, but we're in North Florida. It's still pretty temperate here. We get about 3 seasons. I'll take it. It's good.
No state income tax in Florida.
Yeah, no personal state income tax. And, for a lot of people who are business owners, when depending on how their business is structured, if that tax flows through their personal return, it's a significant difference. I mean, you're really talking about, you're looking at, thousands and thousands of dollars that you're saving. So our home had never been worth more money in Lake Forest. We had very good timing when we bought versus when we sold. So, everything made sense from the financial point of view, but really it's about the community. And, I didn't want to put my kids through public school in Illinois. My son going into 5th grade, we all know about the laws around sex education and things like that. I didn't feel comfortable with public employees having those conversations with my children. So I decided that it was time to move on. It wasn't a fit for us anymore.
Well, you're not alone in doing what you did, moving from Illinois to Florida. Illinois has the largest outbound migration rate in the
Sure.
country.
Yeah.
Percentage. I think California has more people-wise, but as a percentage of population, Illinois is number one. Might be a different finger than this one, but highest outbound migration rate, and includes a former governor of Illinois, Bruce Rauner. He moved to Florida. So there's a lot happening with Florida. Florida is on track to pass California one day as the largest state in population.
Well, you see it in just in terms of representation, right? Illinois is losing congressional seats. California's lost congressional seats. Florida's picking up seats. Yeah, I mean, people are going to vote with their feet. And there's the whole thing. Yeah, I don't want you to California my Florida, or California my Texas, or Illinois my Florida, whatever. So as long as people vote consistently, and don't bring their bad ideas along with them, I'm totally okay with it. But just by the numbers, yeah, you're right. I mean, you look at the unfunded pension liabilities within the state. You look at the finances and everything else. There's really a very limited future for my children staying in Illinois. And as much as it pains them to leave their friends behind, I just ask that they trust me as their father to make a good decision for the family. And that's really what it comes down to. I don't see Illinois being sustainable in the long term. My own personal prediction is within the next 5 or 6 years, the people who have the means to leave, they'll have left. Everybody else who can't leave will be stuck there in a certain way. They'll say, oh, I can't refinance my house. I can't move because the rates are too high, or I don't have enough savings, or the taxes are too high. The property value's gone down. It's in a really bad place. I feel like it's in a little bit of a downward spiral. You look at the crime, obviously we touched on crime just a little bit earlier. Crime is on the increase. Lake Forest, thankfully, has a very, well-trained, great police force. They do the best with what they got. But when you have the state's attorney not supporting them, obviously that's really frustrating. But we do see even recently an uptick in property crime, along Route 41 and those areas that kind of connect other sorts of pockets that have more crime into Lake Forest. So, having that element within the community, it's unsettling. It's obviously not violent crime, but it starts with property crime, and then who knows where it goes from there. I didn't want to stick around to find out.
The vouchers is very interesting to me, and I think that creates competition. And
Sure.
If nobody wants to go to that school, then something's going to have to happen to that administrator and all that stuff. The school districts, Joe's telling me there's so many school districts in Illinois, and I'm guessing there's fewer in Florida. So
I'm glad you brought it up, Pete, because I got my notes right here.
Hit me.
Yeah, so and I looked it up. In Florida, we have 73 school districts. Okay. In Illinois, it's 852. So that's 852.
There's 73 in Lake County.
I know. So obviously that creates bloat. It lends itself to waste, fraud, and abuse when it comes to tax dollars. So, being able to leave that system and streamline it, is definitely an advantage. Now, Florida has, let's see, last population that I saw, 21.25 million. Illinois is about 12 and 3/4. So, it's about 1.5 times the students in Florida, but Illinois has 12 times the districts. They're actually, like, if you look at it on paper, it's kind of linear, and you see it. So our average cost per pupil in Florida is just a little bit over $10,000. In Illinois, it's almost 13,000, right? So, it's almost 30% difference. How can you sit there objectively and just look at the numbers, be like, Illinois is crushing it. We're doing such a great job. It's hard. And you look at the incentive structure around public employee unions. So in Illinois, I believe that we have, looking at my notes, we have 654 pension systems within Illinois. So the ability for somebody to do 20 years at a job, get a pension, start working, do another 10, 15 years, get a second pension or a third pension, that's insane. Florida, when it comes to pension systems, isn't much better. They have 468. So I wouldn't say that they're doing a lot better, but they're still ahead of Illinois. But you look at a state like Wisconsin. How many does Wisconsin have? 4. They have 4 pension systems in the state of Wisconsin. So police, firefighters, teachers, and any other public employee. So they've managed to streamline that process. I don't see a pathway forward considering the structure that's in place around public employee unions and teachers unions and things like that, and the people who are in charge, the JB Pritzkers of the world, to really put out an effort and say, you know what, we're going to take this problem seriously. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our citizens to make sure that we're providing the most honest, most efficient service possible. It's not going to happen in my lifetime, I'm afraid. So that's a big reason why we left. We're paying all this money in property taxes, income taxes, the business tax, everything else. Just wasn't a value to live here.
Second thing, Jake, is I don't know what the right wording is. The woke mentality, the virtue signaling. The people in Florida have a little bit tougher skin. They're not as so triggered as in Illinois. I noticed that. Did you notice that? And why is that?
Yeah, no, I definitely noticed it. I think what I've seen in my experience is there's more of a live and let live kind of philosophy here in Florida. People can have differing points of view, and they can be very outspoken about it, and people will just kind of say, okay, whatever, that's fine. That it's like Lebowski, well, that's just like your opinion, man, like, and people get along with that. It's really good. Where I am in Florida, there's a lot of transplants. Not many people in my area are from this area. So they're from all over the East Coast, the South, they're kind of people who have come here over the last 10, 20 years. And they seem to all just be able to coexist because nobody here is really entrenched and rooted in sort of a mentality. And, linking that back to Lake Forest, I think there's a lot of Lake Foresters who kind of get entrenched and say like, well, I've lived in Lake Forest for 50 years and, it should be this way and it shouldn't be that way. And my opinion counts. Your opinion doesn't matter as much. We see that with like the East Side versus the West Side. There's certain people who live on the East Side. Like if you tried to make them go west of Green Bay Road, they'd probably have a heart attack. So we would joke, because I lived in the 4th Ward, I was on the west side, we call it ELF, which is Extreme East Lake Forest.
My daughter's friends have said we live in fake forest because we're out by Eloa. So
yeah.
But Jake, what is that mentality? I'm trying to put you can't say woke because that just triggers them all, but it's like the liberal thinking, and I'm using the word liberal because I don't have another word for it. It's just It is what it is. There is no other point of view. I can't hear you, so therefore I just shut you down, versus being open-minded and hearing what somebody else to say. I don't see that in Illinois. I see that in Florida. What is that way of thinking? Can you describe it better than me?
No, it's very vague. It's very ambiguous. Unfortunately, in our day and age, there's a lot of currency involved when it comes to being a victim and feeling like you've been victimized.
That's it.
And so being able to take that position and have that leverage in society is very beneficial to a lot of people. I could sit here for another 2 hours with you, Pete, and try and go through the sociology of it and why people act that way. Yeah, I think, a lot of it has to do with different generations and the struggles that they've been through, et cetera. But really, I think what it comes down to is, progressive type people, liberal people, woke people, whatever you want to call it. They don't like strength. They don't like anything that is higher than themselves in a lot of ways. So when they can get the upper hand by saying, I've been a victim, or I'm virtuous, or you're a bad person, that to them has so much more weight. It carries so much more authority, that's why they gravitate towards that mentality versus people who are more conservative. I realize that there are things in life I can't control, and there's things that I can control. So I focus on the things that I can control about my life, where I live, for example. But otherwise, the things I can't control, I'm going to let it go. And, people people are people. There's 300 plus million of us in the United States. Yeah. Everybody's got a different opinion. Some people share my opinion on things. Some people don't. So
there's a market for everybody. Third thing, Jake, on Florida on the downside, absolute worst drivers. Oh my God. It's either
they're pretty bad,
or they're a construction person in a pickup racing to get to a job. Crossing the
street on the Kennedy Expressway in rush hour, Pete. That is bad.
You know what? I'll say this, Joe. I think the people on the Kennedy are more predictable drivers. You could definitely anticipate what people are going to do when you drive in there a little bit better. But down here, yeah, people drive. But I would say my chief complaint really is the cuisine. The food is absolutely terrible. Everything fell off the Cisco truck. It's just deep fried garbage. And I just don't like the food. Sorry, I'm a snob.
All right, Jake. Jake, anything else you want to bring up? We really pressed.
Let's see. We talked about taxes, future of Lake Forest, culture, East versus West. I think I hit most of the main things I wanted to talk about. But, again, if I could just summarize it, my whole motivation to come on the podcast was really just to share my experience and say that when I left our community, it was a difficult decision. It was not easy to make. And really, if I ever came back to Illinois, there's only one place I'd want to live, and that's Lake Forest. It's the most fantastic place. It's really a gem. And really, it's the people. The people there are amazing. And I know there's certain individuals, Pete, that maybe you don't tend to like or agree with, and that's okay. But I think on the whole, most people there are really just down to earth, regular, very friendly, affable people. Florida, yeah, for me, it's what my family needs. It's where I want to, try and, fulfill all my goals and everything else. Has its shortcomings like anywhere else. It's not perfect, but definitely a great place to visit, even if you don't want to live here.
Jake Weisser, thank you so much for coming on to Lake Forest.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Joe. I appreciate the time, and I'm welcome to come back anytime if you'll have me.
The Lake Forest podcast is supported by viewers, listeners, and businesses just like you. Looking for the best pool supplies? Look no further than Dohany's Pool Supplies. With a history dating back to 1967, this family-owned business offers everything families need to keep their pools clean and sparkling, from chemicals to equipment. Plus, customers enjoy free shipping on all orders. Visit Dohany's Pool Supplies today at doheny.com, DOHENY.com, to learn more. Broker Michelle Parnell has lived and worked in Lake Forest for over 2 decades. Michelle's lending experience, when combined with her real estate expertise, makes her an invaluable asset to her clients as they navigate their home buying or selling process. Call Michelle now at 847-528-8721, 847-528-8721. For the best cannabis in the world, look no further than Iliad Epic Grow. Owned by Lake Bluff's own Rich Ruzich, they are a cannabis cultivation center focusing on hard-to-find small batch products that will delight both the occasional user and ganjier. When visiting Michigan, ask for it by name. Epic Products, exceptional process. For more information, email info@iliadgrow.com. Havey Communications has been helping first responders arrive safely since 1983. It's owned by Lake Forest's own Mike Havey. Check them out at haveycommunications.com. Laracy & Company CPAs, founded in 2010 by Lake Forest's own Brian Laracy, specializes in tax preparation and bookkeeping services. Earning the People Love Us on Yelp award, their process is straightforward. Just upload, review, and file. For a free quote, visit LaracyCPA.com now. That's LARISEYCPA.com. Explore top-tier aesthetic care at Aesthetic Beauty Lounge, where they specialize in the latest Botox and fillers. Experience the pinnacle of elegance and professionalism in every treatment. Ready for your transformation? Visit Aesthetic Beauty Lounge at 775 Bank Lane in Lake Forest. That's near Wisconsin Avenue. Begin your journey to beauty today. We'd also like to say we're thankful for our Patreon supporters, Otto, John C., Helen, and Herrick.